Hi, friends. Today we're going to read the story of Casey Jr., the tale of a little engine who saved a circus and all the animals. Casey Jr. was a locomotive who hadn't pulled a train of cars for many years. He had an old fashioned smokestack and was just as far from being a streamlined locomotive as anything could be. Casey felt as strong as ever, but he looked terribly out of date. So he stood sadly in the yard behind the engine house, year after year, with a for sale sign hanging from his nose, until someone did buy him. A circus that was almost as discouraged as Casey Jr. It had clowns, bears, elephants, and monkeys, everything that goes to make a circus, even if it is a little circus. But it had no engine to move them. And what good is a circus if it can't go anywhere? So the circus people had looked and looked for a locomotive. They certainly didn't have enough money to buy a streamliner, but they did have enough money to buy Casey Jr., and they did. Casey was worried when he heard about it. Here was his big chance, but he didn't know if he could still run well. He wheezed and he choked when he tried to get up steam. I should have had some regular exercise, he groaned, as he tried to limber up his wheels. Finally, after much sneezing and coughing, he got the dust and rust all out of his pipes, but it was 3 days before he got his whistle working properly. Woo, woo! He whistled faintly at first, then stronger and stronger, until it came out loud and clear. Woo, woo! Woo, woo! Happy days ahead! Clear the tracks, everybody! Casey had always been used as a switch locomotive when he was used at all, so he hadn't seen any of the world. The circus seemed wonderful and exciting as he wandered around the sidings, peeking into the cars and listening to the bustle around him. On the second day, he backed up in surprise when he saw 6 huge elephants march out of one car. Whew, he thought. Looks as if I've got my work cut out for me. I'd better do some training and get myself in good shape. So he tried a few practice runs by himself. He raced up and down the sidings, backed up, banked for the curves, practiced putting on his brakes fast. The clowns saw him and thought he was the funniest thing they had ever seen. They wanted him for their act, but couldn't figure out how to get him into the circus tent. Just for a joke, 2 clowns acted like a locomotive themselves and dashed around the tracks, making fun of Casey. But Casey didn't mind. He thought the clowns were funny too and joined in the laughter. Once Casey saw a rabbit on the track ahead. He put on his brakes quickly and stopped just in time. The rabbit paid no attention but kept on nibbling the clover between the ties. Say, little fella, Casey said, with those big ears, couldn't you hear my whistle? Oh, was that you? Asked the rabbit, pretending he hadn't heard it. I thought it was a bumblebee. He took another bite of clover and said crossly, Go away, don't bother me. Go back to the toy shop where you belong. Casey was hurt. He didn't know what to say or what to do. The rabbit just turned his back and kept on eating. Casey didn't want to run away from the rabbit, but what could he do? He could not run over the little fella, even if he was fresh and impudent. Finally, Casey sighed a deep sigh of white steam and backed up. He glanced at his reflection in a little brook to see if he really looked so funny and unimportant. He had to admit that he was not very modern and up to date, but he knew he was still a good engine. He could handle this circus all right. He kept on with his practice runs. As he became limbered up, he could stop and start easily, could take the curves gracefully. He forgot the insults of the rabbit, and his confidence returned. On the third day, he chugged cheerfully down to the main track. There he saw the railroad signals, and they would not take him seriously. They all made fun of the funny looking engine coming down the track. They winked at him with their red and green lights, both at once. They waved their arms, both at once, up and down and sideways. Casey didn't know whether he should go forward or backward, so he just stopped short, and the signals laughed and gave the all clear signal. Start and stop and start. They would do it all over again. They're trying to make a monkey of me, thought Casey, but he bore their teasing patiently. Some day, when there was real work to do, he would show them how good an engine he was. The great day finally came. Moving day. The animals and the tents and the wagons were all loaded. The cars were all in line. Casey backed up slowly. He would make such a gentle connection that they would hardly feel a jolt. Just then a clown standing by the track blew smoke from his nose and called in a silly voice, "Toot toot!" Everybody laughed, and Casey was angry. "This is once too much," he snorted, and he rammed into the cars hard, clanged his bell for the "all aboard," and pulled out of the siding so fast that the clown had to scramble to get on. It was hard work for little Casey. He dug his wheels into the track and pulled with all his strength. He puffed and blew black smoke from the top, white steam from the side. But when he picked up speed and got on the main track, the cars rolled along smoothly behind him. Casey was happy. He could still pull a big train. He whistled merrily as he chugged along. He whistled at the cows by the side of the track. They mooed back at him. He whistled to some birds, inviting them to hop on for a free ride. Then he saw some young colts in a meadow, and they raced along the fence beside him. When he slowed down so that they would win the race to the end of the meadow, the older horses looked on with approval. Then Casey tooted a quick good-bye to the colts as he picked up speed. The wheels made a clattery song as they sped along. "Watch the wheels go round and round, that's the way we cover ground." Soon Casey plunged into a giant forest. He sniffed the fresh air, filled with the smell of pine trees. He ran alongside a river and tooted at the boats. He went through a town and had a lively conversation with several factory whistles. He tooted as he was approaching an important crossing, and the long arms came down over the road, pushed the people away from the track, and clasped hands as Casey tugged past. Then he came to the mountains. "Whew!" said Casey. "This is going to be a hard pull." He puffed and he chugged and he groaned. His axles ached with the strain. The grade was very steep, but he must go on. He dared not think of what would happen if he gave up now. Backward down the mountain the train would go, faster and faster, backward through the town and the forest, past the rivers, maybe to end in a crash. No, he couldn't let that happen. At last, on his very last chug, he reached the top. There he stopped for a moment to rest, his stout little iron heart beating with a loud clank against the side of the boiler. He bent down and had a long drink out of a cool mountain brook. Going down the other side of the mountain was so much fun that Casey forgot all about the terrible climb. As he rounded the bend, he saw a tunnel ahead. He tooted frantically back to the giraffes, warning them to pull in their necks. They jerked them down just as Casey plunged into the blackness of the long tunnel. On and on they went, and Casey looked ahead anxiously for the little spot of light that would mean the tunnel's end. It was certainly dark. You couldn't tell what might be on the tracks. Casey whistled to himself to keep up his courage until he saw daylight ahead. At last he was outside the tunnel, but daylight didn't last long. The sun went down and night fell. Casey stopped once for another drink at a roadside tank and then tugged on his way again. Everything was pitch black except for a pale sliver of moon, and Casey didn't like this very well. No cows, no birds, no friendly factory whistles to talk with. He slowed down and went very carefully. Then, finding himself going right through a graveyard, he suddenly put on full steam to get away, and the train jerked so hard that 8 clowns were thrown out of their berths. Casey thought the night would never end. When dawn finally did come, he sighed with relief and sailed along merrily again. But he was so interested in the countryside that he forgot to watch the tracks ahead, and the first thing he knew, he heard a shrill whistle almost under his nose. Danger! Straight ahead of him on the track was a streamlined train, headed right for him and coming at a terrific speed, screaming angrily for him to get out of the way. Beside the track was a switch signal pretending to be sound asleep. He had been watching Casey and couldn't resist a little fun at his expense. Casey tooted frantically. The switch signal sat up with a jerk, jabbed out its foot, and threw the switch to a siding. In a split second, Casey darted onto the other track, and the streamliner whizzed by so fast that it looked like a silver streak. Casey, for sheer relief, let off a long blast of steam. "I'm going to tell that switch a thing or two about falling asleep on the job," said Casey, when his heart began to clank a little more easily. "He needs a good talking to." But the switch signal just laughed and told Casey to move on and not clutter up the tracks. "You're all right, aren't you? Then move on. Move on. Can't you take a joke?" So Casey started off, rumbling angrily to himself about the train signals. Enough was enough. He'd do his own watching from now on. He paid no more attention to signals, not he. Later in the day, Casey passed a signal, waving its arms and wagging its head, flashing "Stop!" frantically at him. He gave the signal a sour whistle and went on. Farther along he saw another signal saying "Stop! Stop! Stop! Stop!" so fast that he could hardly read the signs. Casey was very angry. More of those practical jokes, he thought. They have gone too far already. Casey raced past the signal so fast that its arms were blown off. Never had he gone so fast. When he really got steamed up, there was nothing in the world like Casey. Then, as Casey clattered around a curve fast to give the clowns and animals a thrill, he saw the reason for the warning. The railroad trestle ahead was washed out. This time the signals really had been in earnest. And here was Casey, going faster than ever he had gone in his whole life, headed right for that deep gully with the cruel rocks and rushing river below. No brakes could stop him now. There was only one chance to take. Casey put on even more speed, top speed, and as he came to the edge of the cliff, he crouched on his springs and gave a mighty leap. Through the air he sailed, the railroad cars careening behind him. He closed his eyes, held his breath, and then bang! He landed on the other side of the gully, square on the tracks, all of the cars following him. But what a jolt! Casey, trying to get his balance, stumbled over his cowcatcher and slipped off the track. The cars behind him jumped and bumped. One of them even turned over, but it was the car with the clowns in it, and they were used to tumbles. So Casey didn't worry. He just stood and panted. All the circus people piled out of the cars to see what had happened. They counted noses. All the animals were safe. All the people were safe. Everyone was safe. And what a cheer went up when they saw the washed out bridge, the deep gully below it, and realized that Casey had saved their lives by his mighty jump. The trembling ringmaster shook Casey's front wheel in gratitude. The clowns got together and helped Casey back onto the track and asked him if he felt all right. He assured them that he was quite all right, though he couldn't help limping a little. The next day, when Casey pulled into the city where the circus would stay for a week, he had a big surprise. Everyone came to the railroad station to cheer him. The news of Casey's bravery had gone ahead, and the city council had declared a holiday in his honor. The band played and the mayor made a speech. The police department put on a special parade, and the fire department gave Casey a special demonstration of ladder climbing. The biggest moment came when the Chamber of Commerce presented Casey with a ton of coal, and a little girl recited Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Of course, the circus was a great success after that. Wherever it traveled, the story of Casey's heroism was known, and everyone came to see his circus. In appreciation, the ringmaster and all the circus folks bought Casey a fine present, a set of new shiny brass whistles that could toot in a duet. Casey was very proud and very happy. The end.